Is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025 at 6 p.m. I'll call this regular meeting of the Barre City Council to order. Mr. Manager or Council, are there adjustments to the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one adjustment, slight adjustment, which is under contracts for approval. I emailed the council yesterday with an additional contract, which is to purchase a F-150 for the Facilities Department to replace a 2009 vehicle. That would be a contract for $42,612 for G-Stone.
Thank you very much, Council. Any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, an approval of the agenda would be in order.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. Under Visitors and Communications, Byrne Rose.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share with folks what a great time the library, Light Up the Library fundraiser was. And that today I met with, it's the mentor program, the literacy mentor program, Everybody Wins, which is happening at the Barre City Elementary School. We used to have it all the time, and now they're starting again, and they're starting with second graders, and they're looking for more adult mentors, and it means going to the school and reading with the kids once a week, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I encourage any other adults who might have time in the week to be able to do that, to look into that program, and just say I'm looking forward to having a good time meeting some little kids in our community. So thank you. And also thank you for all the sneakers for the kids at school. And there is a need for men's, especially men's, but women's also, winter footwear. So if people have any that's still usable, please donate it to Amy's Armoire. You can just take it down to the storefront itself. Unlike clothing, she's accepting winter footwear for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Byrne. Is there anyone else wishing to address the council regarding an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, hearing and seeing no one. Council, we move on to the consent agenda. We'll be approving the minutes of 12/9/25. There are no licenses or permits being presented by the city clerk. We will approve Downstreet's request to be placed on the town meeting day ballot for voter-approved assistance, approving the Snow Bees landowner permission form, and authorizing the manager to execute a contract for a trailer and the truck that he just mentioned. All of those briefing materials were provided in your packet. Is there a motion would be in order?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Cheryl's going to have a tough time. When you guys are at time, I'm going to let her pick. So there is a motion, there is a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. Under item 4A, we'll be approving the city warrants of 12/17/25. A motion would be in order.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Any abstentions? Noted. Thank you very much. The motion carries. We will not have a city clerk report this evening. We have nothing under Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. Mr. Manager, it's all yours, and
thank you, Mayor.
time.
Yes, thank you. A couple of updates for the council and the public. Number one is that the budget survey for the upcoming budget is live. It's on our website. It was sent out via Regroup. As of when I wrote my notes this morning, we had 89 responses in. Last year we had around 300. So this will be, the survey will be open through January 28th. And that's a Wednesday. And what the plan is will be to present the results of the survey the following Tuesday at the council meeting. So wanted to give people as much time as possible, especially since we're sort of overlapping with the holidays, to get their survey responses in. I know there was a couple of people indicated that we've embedded the survey on the website. And so if you're working on a laptop, it's working just fine and you get the submit button. Some people on an iPhone were having an issue getting the submit button, which is, I think, was just a website coding issue. So we have added a specific link if you're on an iPhone or a cell phone, a smartphone, just to click that, and that will get you to the full survey with the submit button. So that has been, we did troubleshoot that. But yeah, just encourage people to make their voices heard. And last year, we presented all the results unfiltered, and so that the council can weigh the results as we develop the budget for the upcoming year. Second, just FEMA buyout demolitions are continuing this week. Today, crews were wrapping up on Scampini, Vine Street, and then our understanding from them is that they will be done until the new year. So we expect them back in January, but they were wrapping up their work now for the calendar year. We have several properties that are certainly on deck, but they will not be touched until January. Another note is the winter parking ban is in effect tonight, and you may be surprised by that because there's no snow in the forecast, but it is, we have called it because DPW crews will be doing snow removal tonight. So as the snow banks pile up, we do need to take some nights just to get in there without cars to get the snow out. Makes it easier for pedestrian shoppers coming to our downtown or people who just need a little extra help getting to our sidewalks. So please respect the ban tonight, even though there's not snow in the forecast. And this is really, nights like tonight are sort of an important metric to see compliance with this new parking ban because there is no forecast, somebody may be tuned out, but it's really important to be tuned in all the time. And so if you have, if you get your messages through Regroup, you would have gotten it. If you do it through Facebook, hopefully you went to check, it came up on your Facebook feed. If you do it through the website, that's another way. But it's important that people, keep track of it because on nights like tonight, even when there's no snow in the forecast, we may still occasionally call bans for things like snow removal. So really, we'll see. Hopefully tonight, fingers crossed, we'll have reduction in towing. We still have had relatively higher numbers of tows, and especially was difficult last week, talking to the police chief because we had a couple back-to-back nights, and that really made it tough with the parking situation in the public safety building. So the other note is that procedurally we have changed the process so that residents who need to collect their cars after being towed, if they're coming to get them during regular business hours, that's Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4:30, they will need to come to City Hall first to pay. And then any cars being collected after hours, holidays, or weekends, they'll go to the public safety building. So we want to handle as little money as possible at public safety building. We'd rather, when the clerk's office is open, we will want that to be happening here at City Hall. Update from the water department is that they did repairs and replacement of 3 hydrants this week. I know you have heard, council, from residents who have noticed the bag hydrants, and it's alarming. We certainly understand that, but these hydrants were out of service and not functional anyhow, so they didn't do any good whether the bags were on them or not. So we have started replacing them. I can get you the comprehensive list of how many remain out of service. I didn't have a chance to pull that today, but we did have 3 replaced this week, and the crews will continue to do them over the winter as time permits, as they're not pulled into snow removal duties, and as parts are received. So, and we do coordinate with the fire department, so the fire department is aware of where the hydrants are out, and they're aware of where they're coming back online as well. The next update from the facilities department is that we were notified by USDA that the design build option was acceptable. As you might recall, a couple weeks ago, council approved 2 options for the auditorium renovations, and we did that because it was in the midst of the government shutdown. We asked, but obviously weren't getting an answer about whether design build was eligible or not. What we decided to do was do 2 RFPs and just go with the one that they allowed. And so that didn't burn any of our time while the government was shut down. So very happy the design build option was obviously much preferred. It was with REACH for $112,000. So we're working with them now. We haven't signed the contract yet, but Tom's here. He's been working with them and USDA, and we look forward to keeping that moving along. And then finally, I'll ask your indulgence, council. Last night we had the opportunity to celebrate many employees who reached important service milestones with the city. So I will take a moment to read their names and their years of service. Reaching 5 years of service, we had Anderson Brown from the Fire Department, Jamie Herring from the Department of Public Works, and Brian Hoare from the Police Department. Reaching 10 years of service with the city, we had Dave Gilbert from the Department of Public Works and Brooke Pouliot from the Police Department. Reaching 15 years of service were Bill DeMel from the Department of Public Works, Captain Brian Farnham from the Fire Department, and Zachary Tillinghast from the Fire Department. And reaching 25 years of service, he's in the room today. We gets to celebrate with us tonight. Deputy Chief Larry Eastman from the Police Department. 35 years of service, also from the Police Department, Jason Fleury. And 40 years of service, really remarkable. We took a moment to celebrate Catherine Bramman, who many of you may remember retired earlier this year, but she retired after hitting her 40 years of service, so she was recognized for having reached that milestone, even though she's no longer a city employee. And Debbie Seaver from the Department of Public Works also reached 40 years of service. So I want to congratulate all these employees on their remarkable service, and looking forward to many more years. Maybe not for Debbie, she's done her service, but we'll have her for as long as she wants to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. And Catherine, congratulations on getting Catherine and Debbie to actually attend.
It was very difficult.
That was fabulous. It was really a great evening, and as you know, you sit there and look around. I'm reminded so many of you are here tonight, just how fortunate we are. I mean, the depth of service, how seriously they take the job. We just have some great people here in Barre. You know, we really do. And regardless of whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 3 years, they're all just really great people. And how many years are you now? 3?
3.5.
3.5 and 15 minutes. Yeah, so Nicholas is walking around and he comes up to me and he's like, you see, I'm building morale. You know, they know I respect them and they all love me. And I looked at him and I said, Nicholas, you're holding the drink tickets. It was all good. It really was a great evening. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, council, any questions of the manager? Okay, then we'll move on to new business. We have volunteer appointments for the Neighborly Barre Committee. Up first, Marjorie. I think, there you are. Marjorie, how are you?
I'm
Nice to see
doing
you
well,
again.
thank you. Lovely to see you.
Why don't you, if you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? I know about you, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the Neighborly Barre Committee?
Sure. I've been a resident of Barre City for actually 25 years. This is my 25th year living on Orange Street. And then I also, long ago, back in 1993, I worked 6 years at the Aldrich Public Library. And then I moved to the Vermont Historical Society, which then moved to Barre. So I spent the rest of my career there. I was not born in Vermont, as all my cousins tell me all the time. However, my great-grandfather lived on 19 Main Street. My grandfather lived on 9 Abbott Avenue, and now I'm back. So, and that's a little bit about me. But I did get a lot of the 6 years at the Aldrich was actually spent in the archives of Barre history, which meant that I spent 6 quality years just enmeshed in Barre history. And I can't tell you how exciting it is to look at Barre now and see it goes up and down, as all places do, but I feel like we're on that resurgence of the days when Barre was just an exciting and vibrant and diverse community. So, and I'm interested in the Neighborly Committee just because I feel that's a good place to start.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Marjorie. I've known you and your family for decades, so I have no questions for you. I only have an endorsement. Council, do you have any questions for Marjorie? Okay, a motion would be in order.
So moved. Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, thank you very much. The motion carries. Welcome aboard, Marjorie. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Okay, Council, up next is Ginger Cloud. Ginger, how are you?
Hi, good evening. Doing okay. How are you doing?
And likewise, why don't you tell us a little bit about your, well, we all know you, but you still have to tell us a little bit about yourself and what interests you in the Neighborly Barre Committee.
Yeah, so my name is Ginger Cloud and I live in Barre City, and I'm a mental health clinician in private practice, and then I also work for the state of Vermont on special mental health initiatives. Yeah, and I'm interested in the Neighborly Committee to uh, participate more in the city and bringing uh, hopefully more connection and neighborly energy into our city and neighborhoods.
Thank you. And I apologize, procedural question. Do we have staggered terms that we were pointing to?
I was gonna, mention that, Mayor. I suggested doing one of the candidates through June 30, 27 and the other through June 30, 26. That way they are staggered.
Okay, and from the mover and the seconder, what was your intention?
I'll put Marjorie in the longer one.
In the 27?
Yes.
Okay, so any objection from the, we could revote it, but is there any objection?
None.
Okay, thank you very much. So the motion to appoint through June 30th of 26 would be in order?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion is presented. Please, I'm sorry, council, do you have any questions of the applicant? Just like that. All those in favor of the motion is presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. Welcome aboard. So that, Councilor Hillgardner, that puts you at 5, I believe?
That puts us-
Okay, so that is the minimum. You can have up to 9. If there are others who want to participate, but you certainly have a quorum. You actually had a quorum at the first meeting, so just to be clear on that. Council, we will move on to item 8B on the agenda. This is to approve the COSI Fund allocation to support cemetery records digitization project. Welcome, folks, and council. Just as a point of order and transparency, I think you're all aware that I am the trustee and continue to be the trustee of the Eugene COSI Trust. We haven't quite, even though the city's received, I believe,
3 million and change.
yeah,
3.6
million. We haven't quite closed that out yet. There's still a small balance and some tax issues that are remaining, but I just want to disclose that to the council. I don't have, once the money is given to the city as trustee, if I did see that I felt the city was spending the money in a way that was contrary to Mr. COSI's trust as trustee, I would have the obligation to step in. I don't see that that's happening. I don't foresee that happening. I just wanted to raise that issue so that the council was comfortable with me presiding this evening. Any issue with that? Okay, thank you. Folks, go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. Hello. I believe it was earlier this summer, we came with the SEM sites request to put all the cemetery records online. And Scott and his crew are going to be going through our paper records and getting everything organized to input into that system. Now let Scott explain.
Go for it.
At the cemetery office of Near Hope Cemetery, on the second floor, there's piles of material about 2 feet deep that cover the rooms, which is about the area that you're sitting in today. And these records go all the way back to 1890s, and they're a mess. And as Jeff can attest to, the information has not been boiled down and turned into spreadsheets with accuracy. So one of the tasks that the Vermont Granite Museum is willing to undertake is digitization of all those historical records which relate to Hope, Elmwood, and St. Monica cemeteries, and then take those records, digest it down to information about individual burials. And there's roughly 17,600 burials within the 3 cemeteries. And so on the spreadsheet, there'll be a single line row for each burial, and it consists of about 30 different line items or columns of information that need to be collected from those records. There's roughly between 100 and 136,000 documents that will be digitized, and someone will have to look at in order to extract the information that's needed. What's great about the records is they kept everything, at least for Hope. Unfortunately, the same case is not true of St. Monica's or Elmwood. So there's about 16 different record sets or types of records for Hope Cemetery. Not all of them are necessarily going to be important to the project, but they're a good record to have as a historical document. And so having those digitized and organized will allow anyone who's interested in finding details about it will be able to do so in the searchable PDF files or the transcripts that are created by the museum. And those will be referenced within the SEMsite records. The material that we'll be putting on those line items within the Excel spreadsheets will be loaded up by SEMsites onto their site that they're creating for the city for its management of the 3 cemeteries. It will be helpful for, obviously, anyone who's interested in doing genealogical research. They'll be able to locate exactly where great-grandpa's buried. They'll be able to identify all the information that's related to the burial itself and the current ownership of the property, which will be very important for the management of the cemeteries moving from here forward. So we'll be going through the deeds that are here in City Hall, digitizing all that content, as well as everything that's at the cemetery office. It's a monumental task, but between hiring staff, 2 full-time members, 8 to 10 part-time people, and a bunch of volunteers, I think we can get through it by May 1st. That's the plan.
Of 26?
Yes.
You go, girl.
We'll see.
I'm impressed.
We're gonna have an army of folks scanning. We'll have to get some new equipment in order to speed up that process. And I think that thanks to the fact that the city, since the 1920s, spent a great deal of money managing at least Hope Cemetery, most of it's typescript. So I can give it to a high school kid who has to do community service hours for Spalding High School, and they'll be able to come in and read it. There is some that's handwritten that's from the 1890s through the 1920s, and that'll give to my senior volunteers. They'll be able to read that with no problem. And the scribes that were hired in order to run the cemeteries for those early decades, they have got beautiful handwriting. It is relatively easy to read, and the preservation of the records was remarkable. When I went up there with Tom, the piles were deep, but they were in good shape. There's only one window in that building upstairs, so and it was so dirty that it didn't allow much sun into the rooms, and so there's not sun fading on the documents. We found armfuls of maps in great shape. So digitizing is not going to be difficult. It's the reading and transcribing that's going to be time consuming, but I think it's going to be relatively easily done because it is typescript, so it should go fast. So relatively fast.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just add the urgency and importance of this work that Scott's going to do, and you know, we came to you this summer with a pretty urgent request for that SEMsite software because we are genuinely worried about the quality of the records, and you know, we have a pending retirement at the cemetery where we're going to lose the institutional knowledge that is basically piecing together all those records that Scott says with where people are located now and buried. And so that was our urgency this summer when we came to you. And then when we really got our hands around what the process was going to look like to be able to transition to that software, it wasn't going to be able to be done by, it just was way beyond the capacity of our volunteers. Like it is too many records, it is too detailed, it is too challenging.
And honestly, it's too important.
It is. And yeah.
I mean, no offense, Scott, but with compensation comes responsibility. It's so, you know, honestly, I was thrilled to hear that you took this on, that the Granite Museum took this on, because we all know the respect that you and the organization have for our cemeteries. So I was thrilled in that respect, but also that, you know, you're being compensated. So there's a certain level of service that city expects, and I know you're going to deliver. So yeah, I was absolutely thrilled with that. So how do we take, I've seen the records. Jeff gave me a tour a million years ago, and it was, it looked like my office in 20 years. I'd have to take a while. I mean, how do we get those records to ensure, like right now, they're literally in piles.
Right. So they're
How do
not
we,
boxed or organized
how do we
in
get,
any
like where are they going to be as this project?
So Tom and I were talking about at the end of this process, each of the record sets will be organized in boxes. I talked to Cheryl about making sure that we follow the same exact standards that is being done here in City Hall with all of its records. There'll be inventories, there'll be finding aids that'll be created for each of them, following the same practices that she uses here. So at the end of the day, they should be put someplace, and Cheryl's recommendation and Tom said it made sense to put them back where they belong, upstairs, but also it's going to need some cleaning and some possible painting and some shelving, but all the records should be back there, organized, so if someone does want to see the originals, they'll be able to find them with no problem. And then the digital records will be put on hard drives. Cheryl will have a copy, cemetery office will have a copy of the originals. There's searchable PDFs for those that are TypeScript. For the handwritten records, there may be transcripts for some things, but not everything. And so they will be accessible online, potentially, if you want to share all the records. But for SEM sites, it's simply the line entries of all the raw data that's been typed into the spreadsheets. And that's what the public will have access to. It's what we have typed in. And we are verifying the information within that row for each burial based upon the multiple record sets that are available for each of the cemeteries. We know, and Donnie, who's managing the cemetery now, mentioned that he knows for a fact that there are people who unfortunately made mistakes in the past. And so we're going to have to assess which of the records we're going to trust the most. And obviously the first earliest records for a particular plot is probably going to be the most accurate. And then as things get copied, it's going to incorporate errors over time. So, but we'll have to record all of the record sets, scan them all, and then compare them all, because a record set would disappear in use because a new person would be managing the cemetery. They come up with their own system and add in like that, and I'm going to do my way instead. So we'll have to tease all that out, and it'll be important to us to do interviews, as Nicholas pointed out. We've got people leaving. We want to talk to Jeff. We want to talk to Donnie and anyone else in the community that's been responsible for managing of the cemeteries, so we can collect some of that oral history and understanding of how those records were created, how they were managed, and what value each of them has.
How many cemetery directors over the years? No. No, I mean, I remember Dwight.
Yep.
I remember Jeff.
Vicky Fontana.
I've heard of Vicky. I don't know that.
Dick.
Huh? Yeah, Dick. Oh, Dick Fontana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was before Dwight.
Oh, yeah. He took it seriously.
Yes.
No, he was great. So when you're done this project, do you physically verify? Because I know one of the cool things about this software is that you can literally stand somewhere in the cemetery and identify where you are, what gravesite you're at, and it will tell you who rests there. Are you going to physically?
You're not going to do that physically. That could be done afterwards. First, we need to work with the records, but we do have, now I'm forgetting Mike's last name. So Mike Gilbert, a teacher at Spalding High School, he and his wife went around the entire cemetery of Hope, and they took photographs of individual graves, and he created these large aerial photographs with the numbers of every one of the plots. His plot numbers don't match the city's plot numbers, but that doesn't matter. We can figure out the system and how it works. But he can be used as a means to verify the data that we're putting into the spreadsheets. Because he has a spreadsheet of his own with all the information from the headstone. And I've got to talk to him about the photographs he has of headstones as well. But he only has probably select headstones he took photographs of, but he has all his spreadsheets and his maps. And so that will be used as part of our process of making sure that the records line up with what's actually out there on the cemetery. But we won't be trekking around the cemetery this winter. We won't have to because we've got his records. We also have findagrave.com can help with verification as well. And so we may use that. It's been largely done by Vermonters who've gone up there and taken photographs of each of the headstones. And it's, as far as I know, pretty accurate.
But there'll be a searchable database, so we can
Correct.
even depend on members of we can release the database and say,
Will
take a look. And if you see an error, let us know. Because let's face it, since the 1800s, we've kept handwritten records. I'm not aware of any CAD maps. They're all hand-drawn.
all hand-drawn maps, but they were done by surveyors.
Right.
And when we went up in the cemetery office overhead, we found a bundle of maps this big around that was in the roll-top desk, which Donnie didn't know about. I don't know if you did.
No, it was buried under all those columns.
Exactly. We climbed over boxes to get into it, and it's like, there are some amazing maps in there, which are early versions of the ones that Donnie's still using now. And so it's a great base map. And we have to share those first thing in January with SEMsite so they can begin the process of laying out their maps over top of the aerial photographs of the cemeteries and try to get them to line up so that the boundaries are right and the plot numbers are correct. And so that'll be their job in January. We'll digitize all the content, and they're all in great shape. That was the amazing part, because they were in that roll-top desk and probably have been in there since the 1970s, and no one touched them.
And
They date back to
what
the
do we do
1800s.
with the maps when we're done?
So they'll all be put into archival boxes, and they'll be put on the shelf back up in the cemetery office upstairs.
Or maybe the History Center?
Probably not.
No, I mean, there are some things that you can't replace.
Well, they'll be digitized accurately. Even though they're 3 foot wide, we've got a scanner that'll be able to scan those at high resolution, so they'll be available. Going back to the originals may not be necessary, but only in the case of something strange that's happened in the scan. So.
Yes.
Well, I
of
do have a
course.
sort of relevant question to that, which is that the space they're going back into in the cemetery office, I understand there's only one window, so light's not as much of a concern, but climate control, security access?
So security definitely has to be dealt with.
A padlock. And a key hanging on the wall.
Exactly.
So not secure anymore now.
Because there's also an inner room. As you go upstairs, there's an inner room, and then there's the outer room facing the street with the window in it. So we can put them in that inner room. There's no light coming in there at all.
It's a very dry space. It's dry. And it gets a modest amount of warmth from the heat coming up from the lower floor.
Okay, so it's not 100%?
No.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
And it's in the shade, so it doesn't get hot in that building, which is good, so.
And literally, I don't think we don't have anywhere else where we could possibly store. And although,
I mentioned it to Cheryl, she's like, no.
no.
Yeah, that's.
And realistically, it's, we do have, so individual deeds are recorded. So we do have individual deeds in the land records here in City Hall. It's really neat to see the original documents, the original maps, but in terms of other than history, and I value history, I think we all do, they really, once they are digitized and the work is done, they really serve no purpose other than interesting history.
Sometimes those digital records become corrupted.
Right.
And so if you need to go back, plus higher resolution imagery may be necessary in the future. We're scanning at a usable format today.
Right, but the computer records they don't corrupt the records
Computer
themselves.
records will get corrupted. As they
eventually.
open and close every computer record, especially if they're JPEG files, they will become.
No, I mean the database itself, which is the most important thing,
Correct.
which will tell you
Yes.
who rests there,
That's
who
correct.
purchased it, what the number is, those are permanent. And so once those records are established and we've scrubbed them of all the errors, they're really, the JPEG files themselves, the digital records really don't serve a purpose because the legal records are already in City Hall. And I'm saying, I'm not saying a purpose for purposes of the city, which is, our purpose is who has rightful ownership of that plot. Not, believe me, I love the maps, I love the history, I love looking at old documents, but that's not really the purpose of this exercise. Yes?
So just some additional follow-up questions while we're on the sort of subject of preserving historic records and the original things. I would be interested if in the course of this sort of reviewing all of these records, there may be some sort of records that actually maybe belong in the clerk's vaults that are not necessarily legal records, but are sort of early documentation of the cemetery deeds and things like that. So I would be
And there
curious.
are definitely cemetery deeds that are up there that shouldn't be up there.
Yeah. But
And
in
you
addition, early, I don't know, it sounds like there's quite a lot in there, like correspondence related to the founding of the cemetery. There may be some additional materials that are not cemetery records that,
Cemetery association or committees, we found some of those, a stack of volumes, they're all handwritten from the early 1900s. And so each of these record sets will be placed in different boxes, organized, inventoried. And so then City Council can decide these documents need to be here within City Hall, or they're fine up at the cemetery office. There's also records that are probably going to have to be dealt with by Cheryl, in that we found payroll records, what, 1950?
Yeah, we found payroll
my
records from employees who are now residents of the.
Exactly. And we found records for topsoil and other deliveries of materials going back to the 70s. That's going to be separated. Someone else can make a decision as to what they want to do with it. That will not be digitized. The things that will be digitized are those records that relate to what's necessary for STEM sites to do their job.
Yes?
sorry, I have so many questions. Are you going to create finding aids for the non-SEM site material?
No. I'm going to create a basic inventory. These are payroll records.
Got it.
Someone can make a decision about them. These are invoices for things that were done at the cemetery. We will make piles of those. Well, out of the piles that are on the floor.
You're going to find something really neat.
Oh, there's
I don't know if
neat
it's
stuff.
going to be a sketch
Yeah.
from one of the artists, from one of the memorials, a sketch from an artist that we all read about, in our
We
local
found
history.
actually found.
We found the
materials
original
for the gates.
drawings for the gate.
For the gates. Yeah, for
Yeah.
Hope Cemetery.
So there's, and things like that, those can't go, so those are going to the Vermont History Center.
okay.
Sorry. No, I mean, because there's some things that you just can't replace. And so I think you're going to find, obviously, this is a huge benefit to the city to finally get these records digitized and memorialized. But you're going to find some really neat stuff. So when you do, it'll be a lot of fun to look at it. Yes? Go ahead, you're nerding out. I get it.
Scott's worked with me for years. This is not news to him. It does SEMsite serve as a digital asset management system? And if not, what digital asset management system are you going to use to sort of manage the scans and the files that are created?
So we're not coming up with a system to manage those files. What we're going to do is simply have folders for each of the record sets. And following what Cheryl's request, how we label those in terms of file names, and that information will be set up based upon her desires. And then someone in the future could take those digital files and do something with them to make them accessible, outside of someone coming and getting access to the hard drives, which I'm putting all the data on. The city's already got 2 hard drives that are large enough to store all that information. And as we are collecting it on a regular basis, probably every few days, we'll be backing everything up. So we'll be scanning tens of thousands of pages a day.
And will that be online? So if someone literally wanted to go online and take a look at it?
Someone else to decide.
We could.
I mean,
if we
I
can
think,
upload it.
I think that would be cool. I think to have multiple copies, maybe, sorry, keep employing the History Center, but to have files accessible maybe on the History Center webpage,
Yeah,
a link
so that's
there.
why, I was asking about a digital asset management system. That's
Beyond the scope of what the
would
museum
manage,
is doing,
would help manage
and it's
that.
beyond what you're doing with SemSites. SemSites is providing you with a map where you could click on plots, determine who's buried there. You could also do research on the website, type in someone's name, it'll tell you exactly where they're buried. It will show you within the map the locations which don't have burials that are currently available for purchase.
Does SemSites provide an ability to add a file to an entry?
They can, but that's not been requested of it at this point.
We'll be able to, as new plots are purchased, we're going to be able to add all that information in.
I guess what I'm saying is if you scanned records related to a certain plot, could you then knock them down to a low-res PDF and attach them to that record so someone searching the SemSites could then see the historic record that's related to that
As
plot?
I understand, it can be done, same with photographs of the memorials on each plot. At this time, though, what the museum is doing is we're providing a reference that tells you exactly which record set we got the information from, but not relative to one piece of data within the long record. But it's just going to say that within the notes, oh, by the way, you can find information about this particular individual in these record sets.
Yeah, and I think as Tom mentioned, I think moving forward, that's gonna be the practice, which is when there's new burials or new purchases or whatever, we'll start using those capabilities. And then that's something, Scott will give us the tools to be able to, perhaps in the future, go back and add those to the records that we already created in SemSite. That's something that cemetery committee volunteers could do, because they would be, we would be maybe getting one specific document, attaching it to one specific record.
No, SemSites has a module where you could upload the photographs of each of we didn't purchase that one at the initial purchase, but it has that module. So I'm just gonna make an educated guess that there are other modules where you could look up the actual records themselves.
Yes.
So with the comment about as you move forward, like where's the point in time where you stop and you say this is where Scott stops and this is where we start? Like what is that point in time?
My estimation would probably be when we make the site live.
Okay, so then Scott will keep working on it. The Granite Museum will keep working on it until now
we
the
go
project
live,
is yours.
And
Okay.
then from that point, any new purchases will go directly into the site
And by the city employees?
by city employees.
Okay, okay.
The plan is to go live July 1st.
Yes, sometime right in that next summer
We are
sometime.
hoping to have all the current historical records digitized and have the master spreadsheet for SemSites for all 3 cemeteries to be loaded up by May 1st, May 15th at the latest, so they can do their job.
Fantastic. Sarah, Eileen, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just think we were very lucky that we found him. I'm telling you, the first time we started talking about it, we were like, oh, this is answers. So,
Well, we're fortunate in a lot of respects. We're fortunate that Mr. Cozy blessed the city with his tremendous gift, because honestly, in terms of, the city's priorities, to allocate $100,000+ to computerize, digitize the records of the cemetery. I wouldn't have seen that happening in my lifetime. There's a lot of other priorities, not that we don't honor the folks at Hope, not that we don't value Hope, but there's a lot of other priorities in the city. So this is exciting. You're going to find some cool stuff, mark my words. Call me when you do, because I want to see it. Council, so if there's no other questions or questions from anyone in the audience, a motion to approve the COSI fund allocation to support cemetery records digitization project would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, thank you. The motion carries. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Start
it.
tomorrow.
Okay, council, we will move on to the second reading. This was actually warned for 6:30. We're a little bit late, but no one has come or gone during that period. This is the second reading warned for 6:30 PM, ordinance 2025-03, nuisance properties. Gentlemen, anybody want to come up and touch this one with a 10-foot pole?
And I can start sort of summarizing the changes, Mayor, from the first reading. So we had our first reading on this, the council had held a first reading on November 18th, 2025. And the packet included the marked up ordinance language. And all the changes that were made between the first reading and the second reading were indicated in red text and red strikeout. I provided the council with a high-level summary of what those changes were. So besides the typographical or technical edits that we put in, the more substantial changes were in section 26-2 of the ordinance, which was to include a clause that the ordinance shall not be interpreted to violate the Fair Housing Act, Vermont Fair Housing Act, Vermont Fair Housing and Public Accommodations Act, the Violence Against Women Act, or the American with Disabilities Act, and that was a suggestion of Councilor Spalding. Section 26-3 had some definitional changes. One, which came up at the council discussion at the first reading, was to clarify that for buildings with 4 or more units, citations would be counted at the dwelling unit. So as you know, the structure of the ordinance is number of citations triggers a potential classification as a nuisance property. And the question came up, what happens if, it's one particular unit in a building? And so this is a definitional change we made to address that. Also in the definition section, there's clarifications that acts or calls for service related to sexual assault or medical emergencies are not counted in the number of citations that would trigger a designation. That was also a change suggested by Councilor Spalding. We redefined the enforcement mechanism for this ordinance from the code enforcement team, which is defined elsewhere in ordinance, to the nuisance property enforcement team. And the difference here was that the code enforcement team is the manager and the code enforcement officer and the chief code enforcement officer, which is actually the fire chief. The enforcement team we've suggested for the ordinance in this draft is the nuisance property enforcement team, which includes manager, fire chief, and the police chief, just because it's sort of a three-pronged approach to this ordinance. So we thought that this was a more appropriate team to be enforcing the ordinance. And then in section 26-5, we, as suggested, this was a staff change. We clarified the methods for delivering notices under this ordinance to be consistent with the minimum housing ordinance, which allows for, a lot of the people that are landlords or owners we know, and either Nick knows or police department may know, and so we included things like email communication, which is something that is allowed under the minimum housing ordinance as well. We also, I did check with the city attorney, and we included language that provides that a hearing may be held in executive session to the extent permitted by the state's open meeting laws, but the city attorney has opined that, in their opinion, most of these hearings would be held in open session. So we do we permit it, and this was something that, Mayor, you had brought up, so it's permitted, but only to the extent that it's allowed under the state's open meetings law. We eliminated also in this section references to specific remedies that the council could take. This was also a suggestion by Mayor Lozon, which I think made sense as well. This gives the council more latitude to make informed decisions and appropriate actions or corrective actions in response to a hearing. And also, I believe this was also, the last change was, I think, just as a product of the discussion broadly, was to allow the council to consider property owners' reasonable efforts to take corrective action when the council makes its decisions following a hearing. So those are the substantive changes that we've brought forward. I think pretty reflective of the conversation and comments we received. And the team is here, and I am here as well to answer any questions. I think, a really good way to explain, I think, I can't take credit for this, was actually Chief Cushman's explanation, but we've talked a lot about the situation table recently. And one of the ways that we think we would do this, implement this ordinance, is as a situation table for properties, right? So the situation tables for individuals who need assistance, interventions, maybe have become troubled. And so this is a similar approach for a property that may have fallen into similar circumstances. So one way we envision implementing this is every other week, myself and the team here in the room would meet just like they do at the situation table and say, okay, police, where have you been in the last week? Fire, where have you been for, EMT calls that are, concerning? If there's anything in Nick's world that's relevant as well, we would take that into account, and we would start to see patterns, and we would sort of take action in that regard. So I think one really important thing in the ordinance that I'm not sure how much we talked about at the first reading, but I think it's certainly the intent, is that, it wouldn't, 3 citations doesn't automatically trigger a nuisance property designation, right? So there may be mitigating factors, there may be landlords that are working towards corrective actions. Frankly, they may be just minimal enough that it doesn't sort of trigger the whole process, right? So I think I just want to be very clear that this doesn't mean if a property gets 3 calls in the next 3 months that they're automatically going to fall into this purview and that you're going to be holding hearings, because frankly, if we did that, that might be the only thing you do and that we do. So that's why I think the chief's explanation of, sort of talking about it as a situation table for properties was really a good way to think about it. This is really about, figuring out the biggest problems, the places where the most service calls are going, we're having the greatest issues, where frankly you might be hearing from your constituents the most about, right? That's what this is intended to target, and we think the language really it does that, and that's certainly our intent with it.
Yes.
I have a few questions. Can you help me understand when you switched it for a building with more than 4 dwelling units, what was the 4? Like, what was the reasoning with 4?
No specific science behind it, just sort of trying to figure out a right size. I mean, it could be 2, it could be 3. There was no particular science.
Because if let's say you're in a duplex and if it's just one side of the duplex,
yeah,
or even just a triplex, and there's only one unit that's being problematic, it's really just that unit that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to revoke the certificate of occupancy for the whole entire.
We certainly wouldn't revoke it. That would come at a hearing level. We would probably focus a nuisance abatement plan specifically on that unit, certainly,
Okay.
if that was the case, yeah.
But just to be clear, could they? Yes.
Right, but I'm
They could.
saying if the entire property is a nuisance property,
yes.
sure. But if it's just one unit that is the problem, then
Right.
you're really just going to have a hearing with maybe the landlord and or maybe those tenants, whatever it might be.
I think that would be yes,
Okay.
that would be the intent.
Okay.
I think the issue more, as Councilor Spalding, is if we get, for example, say you have a 4-unit or a 3-unit, you start to get multiple calls for different parts of those units. You may want to trigger it even if it was a different unit each time, right? Because you're starting to get a critical mass of problems at this site.
Right.
So it's a balance. I think I wish there was a science to it, but it was sort of just a number that we thought would work and would give us some room to operate.
Well, that makes sense. I appreciate that.
It depends largely on how the landlord engages.
Right.
I mean, I've dealt with this chief, I've dealt with this chief, I've dealt with Mr. Copping, in my other career as a property owner. And the bar really isn't high. As long as you engage on some level and say, yes, I will respond to that, they're happy. But to landlords who won't engage, Yeah, I mean, there could be a time where we look at that landlord and say, perhaps it's time to apply a little more pressure and actually revoke your certificate of occupancy on every unit. Even though these two are not necessarily a problem, that wouldn't be to put pressure on the tenants to put them into crisis, but to simply engage the landlord and make sure the landlord understands you need a plan.
Well, that was what my concern was, because if there are, tenants who are not a nuisance, or
Yep.
they're not the reason, I wouldn't want to have them be out on the street because the landlord is a
And I don't think the
problem.
manager or Mr. Copping would want to do that either, and
Right.
you wouldn't, and I wouldn't,
Yeah.
but you, unfortunately, with some property owners, you sometimes need a bigger stick.
Yeah, I get that, I get that. My second question is about, under 26-4, under I, it says, if a mutually agreeable plan is agreed to, the performance of the plan shall become part of the enforcement record for the property, so on and so on. If after the enforcement team has determined that the owner has complied with the abatement plan, then do they basically have a clean slate, like?
Yeah, they would sort of start a new clock.
Reset?
They would reset, yeah. They
Okay.
would start a new clock.
Okay, and then, so under the part for 26.5 where it talks about if the property, if the property is a rental unit or commercial property, it says, order the property owner to cause the property to cease being a public nuisance property, and to that end, order the property owner to perform necessary building or property repairs, maintenance, and/or upgrades responsive to the nuisance activity. So I'm confused, because in my head, I have an idea of what these nuisance activities are, but I don't understand how that would necessarily fix the nuisance that I'm thinking of. So can you help me with that?
Repairs and maintenance, or is that the specific question?
Yeah, like that you're basically saying to the property owner, you have to perform necessary building or property repairs and maintenance or upgrades responsive to the nuisance activity.
Yeah, so that could be, and it's sort of referenced in that next section that was struck out as perhaps being too prescriptive, right? So it could be security cameras could be a response to that, right? So to make sure if there's activities that are potentially illegal, that a we might say you should have security cameras here because we've been here for drug calls, right? Something like that. And so the other one is possibly the lighting as well. So I think a lot of those things, Council, would be similar to what was struck out. I think it was wise to strike it out, not to be too prescriptive and to tie the council's hands. But that would be part of what would be helping to abate the nuisances. It may be, part of it may be to not allow certain guests to visit that property, right? So if it's a guest of a tenant that's constantly being the problem, it's not somebody who actually lives there, it may be trespassing them.
Right.
And so
I just was thinking, like, this isn't code enforcement, that's a different
No,
thing.
that's
Like, the
different.
way that I was reading it, I was like, that's not what
very
we're
different.
asking for.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay.
It would be, and it's confusing because a lot of what it might be is what was struck out, but that was only to not be prescriptive, but it might be, you need to put some lighting here because this is dark and activities are happening here that are problematic, and we think that the lighting will help it.
Okay.
Right, so we want you to install that, and we think that'll abate the nuisance activity in this particular spot.
I see. Okay, that's helpful. And then can you just walk me through, what does it look like when you revoke the certificate of occupancy for a unit or property? Like, what's the time frame? How does that work? Does it give the tenants a chance to find another place to go?
Nick, you want to speak to that? Because you got to come up here, sorry. Because there are different ways to do it, and it depends on the severity of the offense. So, Nick, I'm sure you can speak to that.
So revoking occupancy is the highest level of severity of anything that we can do. Generally, depending on what's going on in the building, will predict what the timeline may be. In the fact of, we had a building that a structural engineer told us was best suited for demolition, you had 30 days to get out. And that was doing my best to give someone a roof over their head while still taking into consideration what's my liability on my back if something's to cave in on them. If it's smaller items, it's going to be harder and there's going to be more of a snowball effect to get to that point. I could foresee us being able to extend that as long as the mayor has said, we're being engaged, we're trying to find a place. Who are you talking with? How are we going to get to this point? Which most of the other entities that would help folks find housing are reaching out to us saying, why are these folks looking for housing? Can you confirm this for us?
Okay. But so there would be enough time for them to find another place, hopefully?
Yeah.
Depending on the severity. I mean, also
to be
under.
clear, maybe not. But if you have, I mean, think about this. You have, and Mr. Copping has seen this, you have a landlord who doesn't have adequate heat, doesn't have any smoke or fire detection, measures. In other words, it's a life safety nightmare. I wouldn't want your job because you got to sit there and say, okay, I have people at risk. If the building catches on fire in the middle of the night, there is no detection. Nobody's going to get a warning. The building is cold. So what's worse, taking someone out of a dangerous situation or leaving them without a roof over their heads? It's a lot of times, these are exactly the choices that Mr. Copping has to confront.
Right.
It's a dangerous situation that you don't want to, that if Mr. Copping was on the front end saying, Officer Copping, excuse me, was on the front end saying, okay, this person is going to move in there, he'd be saying, no, you can't move in there, but they're there. And we all know how tight housing is, it's hard.
Yeah, I don't want to exacerbate our
No,
housing.
you don't, you're not.
Population,
Yeah.
the issue that we're already struggling with. So that was my only question. And then my last question, and thank you for entertaining all of my questions. What are it says on 26, 5, under H, the property owner or any person aggrieved by a city council decision finding a property to be a nuisance property may appeal that decision within 30 days of the date of the decision pursuant to the Vermont Rules of Civil Procedure. What does that mean?
They can send it to, they can go to a court.
They can appeal
to a court. And forget, I don't.
A civil court.
The civil court, yeah. The city
Okay.
attorney spelled it out for me, but basically this is an appeal procedure through the judicial system.
They
Okay,
would go to they would
Superior,
appeal
thank you.
through Superior Court.
okay. I just wanted to
Correct.
understand what that actually meant. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to add? You're good with this as written, you've reviewed it, and you're good? Chief, good? Chief, yep, good. Both chiefs, good? Deputy chief, good? Okay, council, motion would be in order to consider this having been read twice and to adopt. I think we need 30 days from
Correct.
publication to adopt it. So moved. Thank you. Is a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the motion carries. And this has been read second time, and we'll move to adoption. Council will move on to item 8D on the agenda. This is the fiscal year 26 budget year-to-date update. Mr. Manager, it's all yours.
And Christina.
And Christina. How are you? Come right up, please. Thank you.
Welcome, Christina, her first chance here, our meeting with the city council. You'll be spending a lot of time with her in the weeks and months ahead, so.
Sorry.
So I just want to say, Christina's been what, 3 months? August, it was August. So it's been great having Christina on board. She's doing a great job. She not only has had to learn a new job, which I think, from what I understand, has come with a lot of pleasant surprises and cool things, but she had to onboard somebody new in the office, a senior accounting clerk. So she's had her hands full, and she's done a terrific job so far. So very happy that she can be here with us tonight, and very happy you'll get to know her more. That you'll get to know her more in the weeks ahead as we work on the budget. So I'm going to run through the presentation, and Christina's here to add context and help me with any questions that come up that I can't handle and answer. So the recap of the FY26 budget, it was a $14.8 million total expense budget, which was less spending than the previous year, which was pretty remarkable. And we had, of the $14.8 million, about 10.7 of it was to be supported by property taxes. And we, as we've done in the prior couple budgets, we came up with a lot of property tax relief, $396,000, and that's in the form of both savings, which is anything from reductions and cuts and reestimates. So for example, last year we eliminated the bulky waste event, which was painful. I know that that's one that many residents really like. We eliminated funding for a position in Janet's office. We also, fuel savings, that's sort of a reestimate. We look at the prior year's data, and if we're spending less, then we budget less, which is great. And then we also had some $75,000 in new non-tax revenue, which helps as well. So together, those things helped us reduce the amount we needed to raise via taxes. So I think it was a great budget, and the voters thankfully supported it. These slides you've seen so many times. I still think it's so important to look at them because they are quite telling. Most of our budget is fixed, right? So that's, if you can look here at the big blue part of the chart, is our wages and benefits for our staff, which is about 70%. And then our discretionary spending, so our fixed costs, there's the 15% wedge of that are things we call fixed costs, which they're not necessarily mandated, but we pretty much have to have them. Like we need phones, we need emails, we have to put fuel in vehicles, we have to buy sand and salt, right? So they're not, no one's requiring us to do them, but we kind of have to. And then what's left is that discretionary wedge, which is the smallest wedge, equal to the fixed cost wedge, 15% of the budget. That's where things like the bulky waste event lived, right? And so when we do have to come up with savings, we have that part really to work with. We can make some changes around the margins on the fixed costs. Our wages and benefits are pretty, they're what they are. Most of our labor force is unionized with defined benefits, right? So we can't really reduce them.
Excuse me, is that other municipalities in that area?
Very similar. If you looked at this chart for probably every local government, it probably looked just about the same. Yeah. And then this chart sort of mirrors that, which is it's also tells a big story of what we're working with, which is that most of our revenue is from local property taxes, right? So you look at the biggest part of this chart again, and that's taxes and pilot payments, and that's 72%. And then we have city-generated revenue, which is the next biggest chunk, which is 22%, and that's things like all the activities at the BOR. If anybody comes to pay for permits, or if they have a fine, anything of that nature, that's considered city-generated revenue. Or the cemetery deeds that we were just talking about, that's also city-generated revenue. And that smallest wedge, we get very small amount of our money comes from federal and state assistance. So so really fixed budget. About 85% is pretty much a given anytime we start the process. And then most of that is being funded locally here by our taxpayers. The FY26 budget conditions, red is a bad color. So those were the conditions. They were all red. And some of them, because costs were going up, but the arrows are moving in different directions, but red is bad. 5% contractual wage increases. So, those are things that I know we negotiate, and it comes with a cost, right? It comes with an increased cost, but it's also, we have to pay our people living wages, and we have to be competitive. And so that is we accept it and we support it, right? These are contracts that we agreed to, that I bring to you for approval, and they're both important to make sure our employees can continue to afford to live here, and that we can continue, and they want to keep working here, right? So those are sort of self-inflicted but necessary costs. The 18% increase in healthcare costs is just really unsustainable. I think the year before that was in the 20s. I know Christina started doing some work on the baseline budget. Things are looking better this year, so we're hoping that it won't be nearly as problematic to budget that in. But the last 2 years have really, really hurt us on the healthcare side. So that is really needs to start sort of slowing down because it has taken up a big part of our spending. In the 26 budget, we lost, we had the one-time $1 million in assistance from the state that we lost last year. And that's going to be a theme throughout that $1 million is going to explain a lot in the next couple of slides. So there's some funky numbers from the FY26 budget, but a lot of it comes down to that $1 million, which was one-time aid from the state. We have, our fund balance has been depleted due to flood expenses. We're hopeful as we get FEMA reimbursements, we'll sort of rebuild that because we had a really healthy fund balance before the flood, but we had to prepay for we had to sort of pay up front for all the FEMA expenses. And then we're in the course, it hasn't quite hit us yet, but we are losing grand list value due to buyouts, which means that the property tax burden gets spread around fewer property tax payers. So the final budget math last year looked like this. We had $396,000 in tax relief, which was through savings and new revenues. And then we had a flat expense budget. As I mentioned, we actually slightly spent slightly less money this year than we did the year before. That still resulted in a 6.3 increase in municipal taxes. And the reason is that $1 million I mentioned. We had to make that up because the year before, that money was in our budget from the state. When that goes away, the expenses don't go away, right? Even though we cut spending by $70,000 or so, we still had to make up that $1 million. And that's why, even though we had basically a flat expense budget, we had an increase in taxes last year. So the year-to-date is looking fine and healthy, nothing alarming here from the numbers that we've been running. On the revenue side, we've collected $10 million, which is about 68% of the revenue budget. And on the expenses side, we've spent about $5.7 million, or about 38.6% of the budget. We've spent about, you can see sort of the numbers between personnel, which is our people budget, and our non-personnel budget, which is everything except the people. So these are, we're about 40% through the year, right? So these numbers are tracking about right. The revenue number is high because we collect some revenues up front, and that's what it accounts for. And then on the expense side, you can see that the non-personnel services, that's a little bit higher than the 40%. That's because we prepay some things at the beginning of the year, and so that's why it's reflected a little bit higher. But nothing really alarming here from these numbers as we've been tracking it, and as we hit the 40% mark of the fiscal year. Challenges on the horizon. As I mentioned, the healthcare rate's looking much better so far, 4 to 6%. We're going to sort of hold our breath on that. It's much better than 18 and way better than 21. Again, we're roughly at 5% projected increase in the payroll costs, and that's driven by the contracts we're negotiating. The grand list growth is both, I think, challenge and opportunity. We're certainly going to start to, as buyouts are completed, that's going to start hitting us more. But there's also some exciting things that will offset it as well, like the Seminary Street, the Stevens Branch Apartments will help. Maybe not immediately, but that's also on the horizon and will be helpful. Certainly, we'll talk about later today, Prospect Heights will be a huge boon to property taxes. Again, not immediately, but on the horizon. And then we have continued and worsening accumulated maintenance needs. We have to spend a lot of money to upkeep things, and things when we have to fix things. For our next big thing coming up is, as I mentioned, the rooftop units at the public safety building. We bought 3 of them, in the $40,000s, thousands of dollars worth of costs. Those aren't going to get cheaper, right? So we have to do them because it's not going to get cheaper to wait a year to do them. They're going to only get more expensive. And in the year that we don't do it, we're going to spend more money calling in service providers to come fix them because they're not working. And so when you add it all up, it's not wise to not fix the problems that we see and we can address. So, it's not unusual. It's an old city. It's an old city with old infrastructure and buildings that are old and need love. And so, those things will continue to be expenses for us. We've taken on a lot of them. But as we finish one, another one is sort of lurking right behind it. So those things will not go away. But again, it's not just challenges. There's a lot of exciting things that are on the horizon. I mentioned at the manager's report that we're this close to signing REARCH for the odd improvement. That's going to help us, right? That's grant money. That's going to take a huge chunk of accumulated maintenance needs off the table with federal money. So it's not all gloom and doom. There's certainly, we know what the challenges are, but there's also pathways to address them.
Nicholas?
Yeah.
Where are we right now with labor contracts?
We are currently in negotiations with AFSCME, which expires on December 31st. And then the next contract that is expiring is the fire department contract, which expires in June. We won't begin negotiating with them until sometime in the spring.
Yep. Thanks.
And then on the budget development process, so as I mentioned, you're going to get to see a lot of Christina. These are all the dates you'll be able to see Christina in the next few months. So we've laid out a budget, a time frame here. In January, at our next scheduled meeting, January 6th, Christina will be back and we'll present sort of our baseline budget. And this is sort of, I hate to call it bare bones, but it's sort of our basic information budget. It's Christina taking all the things we know are going to happen, like the scheduled increases in wages, our projected healthcare increases, some givens that we know are coming down the pipeline that we really think need to be done. And we'll present that to you, and we'll sort of tell you what that means numbers-wise. And what we'll be looking for the council there is sort of broad direction on what would you like to see as the staff sort of digs into the numbers, and what do you want us to bring back to you? So it'd be good to have ideas on targets, ideas on priorities, ideas on services, those types of things is what we'll be looking for on the 6th, because on the week of the 13th, we'll be going into the Staff Budget Congress. And so I've mentioned this before, what we do is and Councilor Bergeron had the pleasure of 2 or 3 of these, I don't know.
Yeah, 3.
3, not that you're counting.
I was really excited.
So Councilor Bergeron knows this, but we lock everyone at Alumni Hall for a day, and we go line by line. And I know that line by line is a cliche that everyone uses when they talk about budgets, but we go line by line. And everyone's in the room, and the reason is because that way we get feedback from a broad set of people, we get ideas from everybody, and if we have questions, they're right there to help us sort of navigate it. So we go there, and that's why the meeting on the 6th is so important, to get your feedback, because we go in there, we lock everybody in, and where we start off is what we hear from you in terms of priorities and targets. The week of the 27th, or the meeting of the 27th, we would plan to bring the partners in, so that includes the Barre Partnership, Aldrich Library, and Barre Area Development. They would come in and talk about their budget requests for the coming years, and then we would do maybe 1 or 2 department head presentations. On the meeting of February 3rd, we would finish up the department head presentations, and then we would talk about the budget survey results. And then the following week, February 10th, we would come with sort of a, proposed budget, which really is a document that incorporates, works off of that baseline, incorporates all that feedback we've gotten in all those previous meetings, and sort of present it to you, and how we reached either a target or how we try to address service priorities or general priorities. And then, as I've told the council, but I guess I'll announce now, I'm going to be gone for several weeks to Australia. So we have a little bit of a gap in the schedule here, where we would come back to you at my first meeting back, which would be March 17th, March 24th, March 31st, and we would just focus on the budget, right? So we would pick up where we were. We would take your feedback from that meeting on February 10th and sort of build it into the next budget and just sort of cascade it down, right? Until we refine the product. And then the final budget has to be warned on April 7th to go on the ballot for town meeting day, which this year is May 12th. So that's our process. That's our year to date. Christina, is there anything you'd want to add? I'm just flipping back to the year-to-date numbers. Anything in particular? I know we're not alarmed. We're okay with how things are looking. And Christina, we've also had the benefit of having Carol back in the building, which is such a huge help, because Carol's was a huge player, and when we develop budgets, she knows the the movement of all these things, and I know she's been a big help to me and Christina as we've transitioned from Dawn, who also knew this stuff inside and out. So anything you would add, Christina, that I left out, or? Okay.
Great job, thank you.
Council, questions? Yes.
So last year, we had projected a number of, and you discussed it briefly in this presentation, new revenue opportunities, and those were, I remember some of them being a little experimental, a little bit hoped for. Do you happen to know how any of those have panned out?
The biggest one that, well, one of the ones we were hopeful for was the passport processing fee, which didn't happen. We contacted the State Department had been looking for additional passport processing sites, and we applied, and Cheryl went forward and did the paperwork, but apparently we were too close to Northfield, so they were not interested in us, unfortunately. So I know that was the one that I know didn't pan out. I think everything else, they're always pretty, we're always pretty certain about those because we need to count on them. So I know one of them was, we're trying to take earnings from the opioid settlements, and we're applying those to general fund because our fire department responds to opioid-induced medical emergencies. So we think that's an appropriate use of those funds. So that works out because we have the funding. Part of it was the interest gained from the Cozy Trust to help support some of the maintenance at Hope Cemetery because that is specific to Hope. And so that we know is certain because that's in the bank and we can count on it, and it's using just the interest, which is great because then that generates more earnings.
And that will be in this year's
we
budget
plan
as well?
to include that, yeah, we would plan to.
So
include
that'll be
something.
give or take. I mean, that'll be a little bit of a bump because that should be around, we haven't spent much of the 3.4, so that could be, depending on, what's our current rate of interest on deposit accounts? Got to be 4-ish.
I would have to get back to you.
Yeah, and I think
Sorry,
Carol.
I'd have to get back to you.
Oh,
on
no,
that. So
no,
sorry, I don't
you
know.
don't need to. No, you don't need to. I mean, it's probably 4-ish.
And Carol gave me the number because it was for the item for Scott. She said the fund has earned about $300,000 in interest since it was created.
The Cozy Fund?
The Cozy Fund. And we just allocated 121 for the digitization project.
Right.
So there's still.
But that's principal.
Yeah.
Not interest.
Well, we were
The
going to do interest. We were going to do interest.
Oh, you were
on
going to
that.
do the interest?
Yeah.
But we do have a choice. I mean, we could take the interest. Yeah, I mean, in broad terms, the only thing I'm passionate about at this point is minimum $150,000 increase in paving.
Yep.
And anything more than 5% in terms of overall property tax increase, I'm going to get weak in the knees. 3%, we're done. Let's go home. We're good. So, and I know these are challenges. It's easier to speak in broad terms. It will be a lot easier once we can see all of the numbers. And obviously, the deferred maintenance is important as well. But from what, I think we're all hearing from folks, when they start looking at, when they see that December 1st letter from the state, and I know our school district does not translate into that, they get more than a little concerned. So, so I think our target would be 5, and then we'd have to possibly make some hard choices from there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for this presentation. It was really helpful. I have a question, or I have a request. When you come back to talk about that next year's budget, FY27, and you talk about discretionary spending, wages and benefits, that's easy to understand. You talk about fixed costs. Can you spell out what is in discretionary spending? You don't have to do it right now.
Yeah,
I'm just
I
saying,
can come up with a list, yeah.
Just so that people understand what that is and
it's
that's what
important.
we have to pay.
It's really important. So one really big one, which I think has been a really great success so far, is recreation.
Yes.
Right, and that's, I think if you look at, do we have to have a recreation department? No, we didn't, and we didn't for several months, and I think that I heard it, and I think people felt it. And there's great things.
Festival. Summertime mowing at the cemetery.
Cemetery mowing, yeah.
But I think just so people can understand what the things
pool.
are that we have and we
Right, sure.
sort of take for granted that is discretionary.
And one thing we took away last year from discretionary, which is has what is painful is going to be painful for people who didn't realize it at the time is the bulky waste event, which was so popular that we every year had to get more dumpsters for. And that's one that, that's why I think that was one that I added to the survey this year because I've heard from people about it, and it'll be interesting to see what the feedback is on that. But yes, the discretionary spending oftentimes are the things people love most about the city.
Right.
Right, and so I'll be happy to bring that list.
Yeah. My other question is, when talking about the FY27 budget development process, I think it will be really important for us, difficult, but important for us to also incorporate where and when we are getting notification about our reappraisal. Because I think people are going to have a lot of, they're going to feel very much in the dark until they get some kind of idea of what their property has now been reappraised at. And I went through this with Barre Town when I was sitting on the school board, and basically people were saying, we don't want any increase because we don't know what our tax rate's gonna be yet. We don't know what our reappraisal is gonna be yet. And they were just pushing back on everything. So I just say that just so that we can understand that and maybe plan for it in some way. So, if your house is currently assessed at this, but then it gets assessed at this and the tax rate drops to this, then, so I think it's just something.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a very complicated or not complicated, but there's a lot of moving parts to it, so we have to just be careful.
Agreed. Thank you.
That's a good point. Are we going to have that? I'm thinking back to to their plan. Are we going, I don't recall that we were going to have, I think we were going to have preliminary results by May of 26, but I don't remember that we were going to have them by April.
But which is challenging because we vote on it. We have to.
Yeah.
It'll be on the ballot before we may know the definitive, but yeah.
Right, and that could be challenging for us.
And, in virtually every appraisal, even the partial appraisal that we did the last time, most people didn't see, it was sort of like, okay, everybody's value went up by 30%. And on average, everybody was right in there at 25 to 35%. So there were very few properties that could say, well, the average was 30%, but mine went up 50%, unless you really made improvements to your property. So, no, it's a good point. I mean, we'll do the best we can, but.
I think we have to find a way to explain to people, because I kept trying to explain it when I was sitting on the school board, that just because the value of your home was going up doesn't mean it could be that our tax rate will go down. Like, just trying to have people understand that. It doesn't mean you're gonna have this is the property tax rate we're paying right now, and your appraisal is gonna go up, and so take that number and multiply it by that, and that's what you're gonna owe. Right. That's not how it works. So how can we explain that to people so that they understand the possibility of what may happen to their tax bill?
It's a good point. Yeah. We'll do our best. Do you recall when it was? I'll get that for you. I'll send it out to the council. I'll look it up tomorrow, but boy, I'm thinking it was like May.
I think it was May.
It was.
Okay, it's Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
Okay, they're going to send it out on the 11th of May. Okay?
Yeah.
That's when it's going out. So, any other comments, questions, council, a little bit? I mean, like I said, infrastructure for me is important.
Yep.
To get that, I remember a time when we had that fund upwards, and this is 10 years ago, we had that fund upwards of $750,000, which adjusted for inflation today would probably be close to $1 million. I'd like to see the council make a commitment to get it back up in the next 2 or 3 years to that $750,000 level, and I think we're at
mid 600s, I think.
Yeah, so we're 650, so another 150 would put us at 8. And when I say 750, that's kind of adjusted for inflation. So we should really be closer to 900,000 to $1 million. So if we could do that, if you could just plug that into your numbers.
Absolutely.
And then obviously we'll have we don't know exactly who will be on voter assistance, but we got a pretty good idea.
Yeah, that won't change.
So that's not going to change things much either. Yes?
This is kind of in the pure brainstorming vein of things.
Sure.
But we have talked in some previous years about putting an amount in that is just for flood resiliency projects, whether it could be part of our infrastructure budget that is specific to implementing some of the stormwater system suggestions we're getting, or ordering more studies and things like that. We've pretty much effectively burned through the ARPA funding and other things like that we'd been using to fund those. So it would be just pure brainstorming curiosity what that would look like in the budget, and it may push us more than we want to go. But I would like to get us there eventually, and just knowing what it looks like would start.
Yep.
And then we'll also see the effects of, the legislature did pass some relief for flood-affected municipality who lost grand list value. So we haven't seen that money yet.
No.
Yeah, so we will. So fortunately, not all of the group, but that sunsets.
It sort of phases out over time.
Yeah.
10-year timeline,
So I think it's
think?
10 years, I believe, yeah.
Any other questions, council?
Next year.
Yeah.
You'll get, I mean, it's really not necessary for you to react this evening. You'll get, as you can see from the timeline, you're going to get plenty of bites at the apple. All right, then we'll.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you,
having me.
Christina.
Have a good night.
Nice seeing you again. Thank you. Council, we will move on to item 8E on the agenda. This is the flood resiliency plan update.
So, and the manager's bringing the PowerPoint up, but this is, to remind folks, this had come out of some conversations that we had very early before the flood resiliency plan even existed about how we might create additional capacity in the city's staff that could be used to sort of help us navigate the flood resiliency challenges specifically, and it has become in the next iteration of the plan, how do we think about creating additional capacity across all of city staff to make sure that residents are getting the services they need, and also that we continue to build a resilient staff, because we know that when we flood again, our staff will be on the front lines of it. So make sure that we are appreciating them and adequately resourcing them. So the managers talk through that tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Guston. And yeah, first slide gets you the text from the plan itself, which was summarized by Councilor Guston. So I'll move on to the next slide, which is, I think, another really important thing to do on this is, yes, there are challenges, but there's also really a lot of progress to celebrate. We have a really improved HR function in the city with Jean Galliano, and we're doing much more aggressive recruitment, which has resulted in really much shorter vacancies. So just to give you an idea, Christina, who's just here, we had a 0-day vacancy between Dawn's departure and Christina's start. Like Dawn ended on a Friday and Christina started on a Monday. That was terrific. And our permanent administrator, it was vacant for 30 business days, so not counting weekends, right, when they wouldn't be here, but just 30 days where we didn't have a permanent administrator, which some of you might recall that position was vacant for a long time before we got, Michelle. It was vacant because Michelle went to be the rec coordinator, and we hired Robin. But between Heather and Michelle, it was over a year. I think it was over a couple years even. And so that's, that went down to 30. That was terrific. And our assessing clerk, after Catherine retired, 40 years in the city, retired, and her replacement was in his seat in 18 business days. It would have been even shorter, but I think Janet was out of town for Thanksgiving, so we didn't want to start him until the next week, right? So it would have been, that one was even longer than it could have been, right? So these are great successes. These are long-term vacancy, and that's the next bullet, which is filled our long-term vacancies with the assessor, which was vacant for many years as well. And Carly and Larry have been doing a great job. You got to see them at the last meeting. We're also, we found some really good people that we're promoting, and we're cross-training staff where applicable, and the promoting of these rising stars. For example, I think you've all had the chance to meet, many of you had the chance to meet Jake at the water plant and the wastewater plant. Rising Star is now superintendent of the plant, and that's growing a bench here, right? That's developing people who can do these jobs long-term, who can learn in the jobs and grow in the jobs. And the plant is also a great example of where we're cross-training staff to be both at the water plant and the wastewater plant. So those are great things that are happening as well. And we're seeing more applications being submitted for our jobs. I mean, there was a time here where we wouldn't get any applications for positions. They would sit idle, and we wouldn't get candidates, or they wouldn't be, good enough candidates, or they didn't have, they didn't have the right certifications. And now I think the positions are becoming more attractive. We are, part of that has been us, and I thank the council for approving this. Our last contract with USW, we increased benefits for early in the career. And one of the problems was that, many of our labor contracts, the benefits at the early stages of the positions were quite low, and the benefits for the very tenured employees were quite high. And I understand that those benefits grow over time, but frankly, what had been happening a lot of times is there was very little incentive for the people on negotiating teams to negotiate higher benefits for entry-level positions because they didn't get that, right? And so that became the city's priority, to increase benefits, which was a strange position to be in, but we got more vacations, more paid time, and even though those are benefits that we end up paying for, they're valuable because people want to work here. A lot of people didn't want to come start to work here because they, for example, didn't get vacations for a year, right? That no one wants to do that. So there is a lot of progress to celebrate sort of up and down the organization in terms of our capacity. So despite those recent successes, the challenges haven't gone away, right? So one of our biggest challenges is that our recruitment is really limited to candidates who are within commuting distance of Barre. We can't, we're not in a position to recruit from out of state, from out of the region. Even Chittenden County gets a little concerning because you don't know the commitment level. And so because of the housing challenge, because it's so difficult to move these days, you can't just pick up and move, we're limited to our sort of central Vermont community to find people that can do the jobs that we offer. We are competing with wages offered by other municipalities in the private sector, so that's an ongoing challenge. So for example, anyone with a CDL is, can work wherever they want. And private companies have the ability oftentimes to either offer more money, offer bonuses, offer things that we can't do because we're bound by union contracts. And so we are frequently, competing with that and other communities that can, neighboring communities that can afford to pay more sometimes. We also, we're challenged by the fact that a lot of the jobs that for the people that we employ requires, they're very specific. They require certifications, licenses. So you can't, if you want to work at the wastewater plant, you're going to need to get past tests. Yeah.
Our police force, they seem that we pay on a higher side, don't we, in this area?
They have been, yeah. I mean, we just negotiated that contract last year, and they got a healthy increase. We're still below, for example, Montpelier, which gave.
I look at the overtime,
Yeah.
and they're making bucks, but that's
Yeah.
because we're short. But
Yeah.
it just seemed they were paid well in this area.
Yeah, I think we made efforts to bring them up, and a lot of the, on the police contract as well, a lot of the increase also went earlier on in the steps because, again, it was a situation where we were having trouble recruiting at the bottom, not at the top of those ranges. Yeah. And then, so licenses, you have to be able to pass state certification exams, licenses to be able to continue to work at our plants, for example. And I think the other challenge is that we're pretty minimally staffed, right? We don't have, there is no fat in the organization. And so we're often, unfortunately, in a reactionary versus proactive mode, right? So there's a lot of things that we want to do, that we'd like to do, that would be good practice to do, that we just don't have the time for, so because we're too often we're reacting to what's in front of us that day, right? So that, I think that's a situation where services suffer because we have a lot of creative, talented people who have great ideas for the things they'd like to do, but we don't have the bodies to do it, and part of it is on the next slide, we don't have the time to do it. And when we last discussed the staffing issues, and I think was really the nexus for putting this in the flood resiliency plan was, talking mostly about the staff capacities sort of in the city hall sector, right? The leadership sector of the city, myself and the department heads. And I talked then, that our capacity challenge is not that we don't have the right people, it's just that the right people don't have the time to do all the things we want them to do, and that they should be doing. And a lot of that, there's a couple of reasons for it that I've noticed, and one of it is that we don't have middle management, right? So when I, just as a personal example, when I worked at the New York City Budget Office, as a deputy director, I had 4 assistant deputy directors below me, and they had unit heads, and they had analysts, and, so I could focus on bigger picture things, and even my assistant deputies were focusing on bigger picture things. I've mentioned to you, I'm recruiting lifeguards via text message, right? Like that's what I do a lot of times, right, in the summer. And so, and that happens not just to me, but, Brian Baker in Public Works is verifying timesheets, right? That in maybe in a bigger organization, somebody would do for him, right? And so when Brian's doing timesheets, he can't do engineering-related work or project-related work, right? Chief Vale does downtown patrols, right? Which means he's not doing chief work, right? So that's where the sort of the middle management comes in, is that myself and the department heads end up doing, not that any task is beneath anyone, but it's I don't think you're necessarily paying me to recruit lifeguards, right? But that's what I end up having to do. And then, this is reflective of staffing levels, which have decreased in all but 2 departments. The only department they've gone up is manager's office, and that's because we hired Chris to do IT, and Tess is on the grant, right? So that's the anomaly there. But everyone else, again, talking about Public Works, there's an engineering tech position that became vacant shortly before I started that we've never been able to fill, right? And that was somebody who did engineering tech work in-house that we don't have. We have to contract out if we need to. But that's an example of a position that sort of was lost. And these minimal staffing levels, these bare bones staffing levels, they result in backlogs. I think the best example of this, we've seen is Janet, who, had for many years wore several hats until, I mentioned earlier, we finally got her an assessor. But for many years, she was the assessor, the planner, and the permit administrator, right? And so that naturally results in a backlog of work that takes time to climb out of, and then you have floods on top of it, which sort of push everything further back. So that's the real, I think when we talked about this in the context of the flood resiliency plan, it was how do we address sort of these issues here that are sort of City Hall adjacent. But the reality is that, all of our departments, these staffing impacts are, felt across the city, right? So in the police department, what ends up happening due to the staffing is there's scope creep. So we're asking officers to do work that is, sort of outside their traditional roles sometimes. There's insufficient staff to do things like a community service officer, which the chief has been really passionate about, or, downtown foot patrols or bike patrols, which they were ended before I started, but I know we're very popular here as well. Fire and emergency medical services is our only fully staffed department. But they have increased call volume, right? The calls go up. You have overlapping calls, and that results in excessive overtime and the reliance on mutual aid, for example, right? So that's an impact there as well, even though they are technically fully staffed. Public Works, we have smaller crews, we have smaller number of crews that can be deployed. That means we get to fewer construction projects that in the construction season, which is already pretty short, and that sort of contributes to the deferred maintenance, right? That's why, if we had 2 more people in Public Works, that's another crew that can be out doing hydrants, for example.
Is the bare bones because you can't find the people or because we can't find the money to pay people?
It's a little bit of both. So Public Works has 3 or 4 vacancies right now. So they have 3 or 4 funded positions that we struggle to find people for. Mm-hmm. Now, even when they are fully staffed, I think we're still smaller than, for example, Montpelier's Public Works, which is comparable size and comparable need, right? So you could do more, right? So another crew just lets you do more maintenance projects, but it's both.
The reason I ask is that in little churches, you often see this, what you were calling the creep of scope. And one of the things that I often found myself saying when I was doing consulting work was, you're paying your priest to do secretary work. You're paying a professional level salary to do this. It would be cheaper
Yeah,
to hire somebody to do that, and.
correct. And that's,
If you could hire them.
If you can.
If you could hire
okay, so
them,
that- And
They
that's
don't
the
ex- I
question.
mean, that
if
is,
you can
in my real life, that is the clients that I have don't say, I pay too much in income taxes. They don't say, the regulations are killing me. Everyone is saying, I can't find help. And it doesn't matter what the industry, whether it's auto service, whether it's an accountant, whether it's folks at the History Center. I don't know of any employer, sizable employers right now who don't have open positions. Everyone is competing. I mean, anybody want to be a bookkeeper? I have 7 clients looking for a full-time bookkeeper right now. Exactly.
In the facilities department, what the staffing means is we have to constrict scheduling, right? And I think we all heard about that. We had to sort of shrink the hours at the BOR to make it work. And what that means is they're less hours, right? And that upsets people who are used to different hours at the rink. And then planning, permitting, and assessing. I think you've heard about Janet's. She was drowning in work, and we've gotten her help. But again, there's the minimal staffing here means sort of the opportunity cost of grants that we don't apply to, right? Just because we don't think we can manage them, because we don't think we can write them, and it results in loss of customer service, right? We are just delayed in getting to people who need permits, or what have you. So I think that, I'm very realistic. I'm not telling you that we should hire staff in every department, but what I'm saying is that there would be benefits to not being at sort of this minimal staffing level, and at every department there would be improvements in service to the residents of Barre, right? And I think one really important thing that, as we talked earlier about the budget, one of the things that at the staff level we'd like to do, and I've started talking about the department heads, is creating and evaluating proposals for the council to consider in the context of this budget, right? So if there are priorities of where we can add positions, and I'm very, very realistic, I want to be very clear, I'm not saying we add department or people in every department. That's not sustainable. But if there are places where the council believes that additional staff would help, we can bring you proposals that would do that, and we can prioritize them based on where we think there's the biggest impact. So for example, one area where I think is really important is the planning department, where we eliminated a position last year, where we could probably support an additional person who's doing both permitting and zoning enforcement, right, which we struggled to do because of the lack of capacity. And so that might be an area where there's value in reevaluating and saying, do we put some money back in here to find someone who can do that kind of work, right? Another question that was on the budget survey that's out live is and I put it there because I hear a lot about it from not just people up here, but in the community, is do we want some officers to do some downtown foot patrols, right? Some dedicated people who that is their job, to be doing sort of some downtown community service policing, right? And that's something that the chief has been very passionate about, and that we try to do, this last summer and the summer before that, we had to do with overtime, right? Which again, we're at the whim of officers who want to take those shifts, and we have to pay extra for it. But is there value, for example, in adding some staffing that would help us improve and provide that service that people like, right? So those are the kinds of things we can talk about. The department heads are working on it, and we look forward to sort of chatting about, are there ways and areas where we can prioritize? Could it be in City Hall too, right? Could it be a more permanent grant person, right? We had a great experience with Jim Levinsky with the CDB GDR grants. We saw what that can mean, and that's another bullet too here is do we do it through contracted help, right? Jim was a great example of something that worked out really well. He did a great job writing those applications, and as much work as it took all of us, having Jim on board really made it possible, because I don't think otherwise we would have been able to do what we were doing to sort of do the legwork on the grants, and what Jim was doing was to turn it into beautiful words, right? So that's another way that we can sort of mitigate sort of the City Hall level aspect of it. And one big piece which I've mentioned a couple times is looking forward to advocating at the legislature for the extension of the grant that funds tests. I think if we're not successful, we certainly think that it's important to continue that role in some capacity. So that would become a cost if it doesn't get extended, but that's another way, that's a really good way for the state to sort of help us with our capacity issues by extending a grant that's just has a proven record of working and doing great things. So there are ways to, go about it, and we look forward to sort of a good discussion on it as we get into the budget cycle. So thank you.
Questions? Yes.
I wonder, as you were talking about Tess's position, I wonder if, when we had the legislative priorities meeting last week, is there a way for us to work with other communities that, like maybe we don't need a full-time, this kind of position, but we could work with Montpelier or Barrytown or Northfield or whatever?
Tess actually talked about that. That if they were a little squishy on just, Tess could work with Barry and Montpelier.
Yeah.
And I think both Tess and the manager had talked about that last week.
Yeah,
So-
no, but I was thinking that position, but
Advocating.
also are there other positions that may also allow for that kind of, where we could share something that might be helpful?
There could, I mean, our restriction would be, it'd have to be non-unionized positions.
Right.
So if we shared, for example, a city hall level position or a grants coordinator position, that could be an option. It would limit us to where it could happen, but it certainly would be an option. And I think that sharing services is a great thing to do in government. I love doing it. It's also the hardest thing to do though, because of the differing expectations. But when we can make it work, it's terrific.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes.
Well, it might be, building on what Councilor Spalding said, it might be super interesting, this runs into union stuff, but to share a position with Montpelier and Plainfield that is responsible for working on engineering and implementation of flood-related projects.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, it's the engineering and it's the finicky stuff that sometimes prevents us from getting projects and from moving forward with projects and understanding the full costs of them. And both of those communities certainly have scoping, or for that matter, someone that we hired just straight up ourselves, but for lack of a better word, rented out to other communities and said, we will give you, we will allocate some of our staff time if you want to pay us for it. That might get around some of the sharing challenges.
Yeah, and I think, it's obviously, I don't want to hornet's nest, but, county level services. States where I've lived that had county service, county government, and, love Carly and Larry, they're only here part-time, right? And so I think eventually having assessing services at the county level would be something that's, that could work. There are functions that we can certainly share with other communities and not impact the service levels that we provide residents. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. It's also, it's about finding the right partners to do it with. I know when we were looking at the recreation position, that's something I talked to a neighboring community about, because I also think we share kids, right? Our kids share schools and they share sports leagues, and that was a great, we share a market. So I think there are things like that we can hopefully capitalize on, because it helps all of us.
Not in our lifetimes. No, I've been having those discussions in the State House for decades.
Yeah.
From a pure efficiency point of view, if you think about smaller towns, I'm not picking on anyone, it's just fact. In Calais, you think of other communities, much smaller, 1/10 the size of Barre, and they have a full-time clerk. Now, we have a full-time clerk, and Cheryl works hard, but she gets everything done. So how is it that we have a full-time clerk who gets everything done in a city that is 10 times larger than another town, and they need a full-time clerk? Why? Because no one will take the job part-time because they can't feed their family on a part-time job. So honestly, the county model would serve Vermont so well across everything. We just talked about digitizing records. There are attorneys I've talked to and I've said, if you could literally do a title search at your desk because all the records were digitized, but you had to pay $5,000 a year to subscribe to the service. Would you do it? And they're like, hell yeah. Yep. But we have to get folks in Barre and Montpelier and Berlin and Williamstown to give up their vaults and put them all in one central location and digitize them. It's just never, unfortunately, we all love our own little communities and our own little kingdoms, and we're just not willing to give it up. Along the lines of, we may have, it would be interesting to see if we have additional capacity. Josh Jerome has an incredible skill set. He was invaluable during the CDBG DR application process, as was Jim Levinsky.
Yep.
So, sometimes the answers are right in front of you when you look to folks who might be able to assist us with grants. Jim was great, Josh was great, and we never could have done that work without them. So, perhaps we might be able to continue to engage them in some capacity to do some of the grant writing. What I love to see is when we make an investment, we can show a return.
Yeah.
We're not going to get every grant application we apply for, but we don't have to. When you think about the size of the grants, we don't have to get too many to really, to pay even for a six-figure position.
Right.
So,
and that's a great thought, Mayor. And I talked to Jim today because of the update on the next agenda item. But Jim is eager to get back on board for CDBG-DR, which is fantastic news. And I've talked to him. I said I'd love to talk to him about taking on some more really specific, targeted projects that with his talents he can sort of help us move forward. So doing that on a contracted basis, I think, is one of the best ways we can sort of skip things along. So
perfect. Okay, Council, anything else? Any other questions, comments? Okay, then if there's no objection, we will move on to our final item under new business, which is the discussion of the CDBG-DR awards and next steps.
All right, thank you. So this is a slide and reference, just reminder of what this was all about, which was a lot of flood recovery money coming to Central Vermont, and a lot of it focused here in Washington County. This is a summary of what ended up being our final grant applications. On the housing side, we requested $23 million. On the infrastructure side, about $3.7 million. And about $336,000 in planning grants, for a grand total of $27.5 million in requests. And those were broken out as follows. On the housing side, our biggest request was $10 million for the 355 North Main Street project, which was proposing a 48-plus unit building on the Lenny's Plaza parking lot. And this included demolition of the wing of that building that includes sort of the old Soups and Greens, bringing the building right up to Main Street, putting some commercial on the first floor, and housing on the upper floors. The second biggest pot of money in this category was for the North End Gateway project, and this included 9 buyouts to create permanent floodplain, 9 elevations to protect housing from future flooding. And then 4 clustered acquisitions, and this was just a term of art. The acquisitions allow us to acquire a property, tear it down, and then redevelop where it once stood. And so these are called acquisitions, not buyouts, for that reason. And we picked clusters so that we could have larger parcel sizes to work with. And I'll have a map of this on the next slide, because I know this was sort of the most visually the interesting one. And then Prospect Heights was our smallest grant application under housing, which was for $5.4 million. This would be to support the infrastructure to develop a subdivision of approximately 91 new units, which would be single and multifamily units. The $5.4 million was to balance out the $2.85 million that we've already received from the Northern Border Regional Commission, and $750,000 from the state last year. So this was our housing proposals. The big yellow star there means Prospect Heights was funded. The other 2 were not. And this is just for reference. Again, this is the map associated with the North End Gateway project. The red outline properties were permanent floodplain. acquisitions. The blues were the elevations, and the yellows were the acquisitions for redevelopment. The infrastructure projects were familiar to all of us. These had come out of the river project that we worked on with Roy and his team in the last year. The biggest request was for the Willie Street Bridge, which is to widen the bridge crossing, create an adjacent floodplain on 572 North Main Street. That was for about $2.8 million. And then we also applied for funding for the Harrington Avenue floodplain and debris racks, which is to expand the current floodplain there by acquiring 4 properties through FEMA, creating a bigger floodplain in that area, and then redesigning the debris rack to be more staggered to allow it to both capture debris, but also keep the water in the channel. And that one was funded, so that's very exciting. That's a great project. And then our 2 planning grants, one was for stormwater upgrades. This is to take the hydrology study that Roy and his team at SLR are doing for us, and take the results of that hydrology study and take the highest priority projects that come from that, or the highest problem areas that come from that, and turn them into shovel-ready projects. So we wanted to do the planning to turn, to get some plans ready that we could then look for funding for to actually construct and build. That was for $268,000. And then our other planning grant was for the Potash Brook Courier Park area to design and engineer more floodplain culverts there and look at installing some debris catchers. This was for $68,000. We had to, just as a reminder, we had to scale this down just to do the right math to fit within the caps that we were allowed to apply for. So obviously the $68,000 is not indicative of how important it is. It's just indicative of we had to make some tough choices, and this planning grant was reduced as a result. So this is the summary of the funded projects, which totaled $6.5 million in all. Prospect Heights, as I mentioned, was funded at a requested level. Harrington Avenue was funded at the requested level, and the stormwater upgrades was funded at just below the requested level. We requested $268, we got $250 from the state for these grants. We had a chance to meet with the state team that reviewed these grants yesterday. And this is feedback from the team. First, on the Prospect Heights application, the grant agreement includes a binding condition that we must secure a developer by March of '26 to build at 42 units, and 32 of which must be affordable. So there's I inserted the language here directly from the grant agreement, so you can see the text there of that. That's, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's a challenge. That's going to be real tough, and we're going to do our best to meet it. We're going to we haven't
had our last discussion about that condition, so we'll just put it that way.
Yeah. So we're game planning with Josh and Pat and Janet and Jim, but yeah, that's a tough one. On the North End Gateway project, we heard that the acquisitions were an issue because there's no developer identified for the parcels that we would acquire. We heard that the buyouts and the elevations were fine. I think that's tough. It's really, as I mentioned a couple times, I think through this process, that it's really a chicken and egg problem. It's hard to convince people to build and make commitments to build on land you don't own and may not own, and they don't know when it might happen. And so that's just a real tough sell for really anyone. And so we talked through this one at length. Candidly, I'm not sure there's a way to make this application successful with the acquisitions if that's going to be a requirement for an award, although I did point out to the state team that they did fund Prospect Heights without a developer, although they didn't see it my way. So, I think that I don't think we can give up on that grant. I think we may have to shed some elements of it, which is difficult because I know that of the people who signed up for acquisitions are, really eager to get out of that neighborhood, and it's going to be really difficult to sort of leave them behind. But I don't know if we'll be successful otherwise. Yeah.
It just seems that a lot's been promised to the north end that's not been coming through. Being Ward 3, council person. That's just my personal opinion.
Yep. And then 355 North Main Street, the state didn't feel confident on the budget. And this was, I can understand. I mean, this is a big project. This is a $20 million plus project. And this one came together, as we all remember, pretty quick. And I don't know that any budgetary information will make them more comfortable on this. I think I'm certainly, want to hear the council's discussion on this, but we'll get to it on the next slide about sort of what to do moving forward. But this one was sort of on the budget side. They didn't have a comfort level moving forward on. And then Willie Street and Potash, the state's feedback was these were really strong applications. They just ran out of money. And they were oversubscribed by 160 million, I think. So I think, it's at least, it's good to know we didn't sort of leave anything on the table, that these were strong. They just wasn't enough to fund them.
I have one more question. So what happened with the building on Main Street that they were offered a bid besides the downtown place? Can't think of the name. They bought it last year and now they want to sell it back right near Gar's building.
The Wheelock building?
Yeah, whatever came about with that.
It's still owned by Foxy's. They haven't triggered anything that would
They
require.
didn't show that so-called.
Not yet, no. The next steps is a round 2, which is coming up. This is the first section of text here from the governor's press release. There's $14.4 million remaining that will be only considered for housing projects, right? So the mitigation is out, the planning grant's out, only housing projects are going to be looked at with this $14 million that's left. The pre-application deadline is January 12th. With the submission date for the formal application, February 27th, we obviously have a lot of interim steps as we did last time with public hearings and notifications in the paper, et cetera, et cetera. But January 12th for the pre-application and February 27th for the submission date are the big dates to circle. And yeah, I think, I'd love to hear the council's feedback. I think the team is really wanting to know what direction we're heading. We obviously had the 2 housing projects that were left on the table. I think, my thought was it's hard to leave the North End Gateway piece behind. It may just have to look different for those people on the acquisition side. 355 North Main, I think is, I don't know. I'm curious to hear the council's feedback. I also am realistic that there's $14 million left and that's a $10 million ask. I don't know how realistic it is. And I know that it certainly doesn't work for less than 10. I hate to leave that on the table, but I also think we should be realistic. But yeah, we're curious about the feedback, and the team, like I said earlier, Jim is ready to re-up with us, which is really fantastic. And we're ready to get to work based on what we discussed today. And it certainly doesn't have to be the last discussion, but we're eager to get going.
Amy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I think on the previous slide you talked about a review team, and I was just curious which parts of state government did the review, if you can share that. I'm a little stunned about the Willie Street Bridge because literally we had someone from Agency of Natural Resources come and give us a talk about how important that was and how it represented a natural dam. And even if you're focused on housing rather than the natural resources projects, like that's literally endangering all the housing upstream. So I'm just curious which agencies weighed in on this.
I don't know, and I can only tell you the agency we spoke to, which is the office within ACCD that sort of manages CDBG on an annual basis. I don't know what their internal process looked like, whether other agencies reviewed applications or not, Amy, so I can't say definitively one way or the other. All I can say is that the team we spoke to was the sort of usual CDBG normal team at ACCD.
Yeah, and I find it disappointing because the round 2 is only housing, right?
Yes, correct.
So that's really unfortunate for the Willie Street Bridge project.
Yep.
Councilor Guston?
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings, but I want to wholeheartedly echo what Councilor Ruthier said earlier, which is that we were given a lot of assurances and I don't know, theoretical support for the North End, and none of that has come through in any of the grants that we have been submitting for some time now. And that is I've been thinking a lot about my language. I'll go with bitterly disappointing. That said, I'm really proud of the team that put these grants forward. I think we went forward with good faith, the understanding that Barre had been more impacted than any other municipality, that we had a long list of needs, that we badly needed support for our residents, and that we put out a lot of really good projects. So I'm really proud of the work everyone did on that. Looking forward, to me, it feels like we should absolutely continue with the North End Gateway project for the second round of housing. I am, however, I'm worried on a couple of counts. One is that the reviewers certainly could have simply funded the elevation and floodplain portions of that project and cut off the acquisition portion of that project if that was actually what they were concerned about. That is always an option on the table. That they put another condition on us for the Prospect Heights funding, so they certainly could have negotiated or discussed that. And without the acquisition, elevation and floodplain feels to me more like a mitigation project, so I don't know if it's a strong application for the housing bucket. And so I worry about that. I think that would require more conversation with the agency, but that would be 100% my choice to discuss moving forward on. So
Thank you. Mr. Anthony, did you have a question?
Yes. To echo Amy Gilmore's observation, I am appalled, I guess. I don't know how else to say this, that there was no interagency, if you will, truth-telling or conversation about Willie Street. I just, since it was so emphatic that was a real problem for all of the North End, regardless of what you want to spend money on to reconstitute it, to prevent further things from bad things from happening, to turn away from any kind of investment in Willie Street, seems to me representative of a sort of interagency dysfunction, and I'm appalled. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to be bitterly disappointed yet. I'm not going to be appalled, but what I am going to be is a street fighter. Every indication that we received was that the administration was anxious to help the North End. Every indication we received relative to the Willie Street Bridge was that they loved the application, and then it wasn't funded. So we'll ask our team, we'll ask the right questions, and in the first round, I was loath to make a lot of phone calls to folks. I'm going to be making those phone calls 3 times in the next 1 month. I mean, that's what we have to do. As I look at this, I think that the 355 project, I'm not sure where they thought the budget was weak. I mean, it was there. But again, I have to be realistic with $14 million remaining. And I'm doing math in my head. Plainfield received $2 million, a project in Plainfield, good project. Barre is roughly 7 times the population of Plainfield. So I guess if they get 2, by default, we get 14. We've received 6. We need 9 more. So that's the math I'm doing in my head.
North End is 8.
North End, I understand. North End is 8. Yeah. And even a partial funding, I think the Willie Street Bridge, even a partial funding, although they're doing housing, well, if you're talking about the North End and you're not doing some mitigation, like, with the buyouts and with the creation of the floodplain, you might as well not be doing anything on the North End. So I don't know if there's a way for us to incorporate the Willie Street project into the North End. For me, the North End is going to be a high priority. If we look at that remaining funding and the fact that we are in control of 143 North Main, we could put in something for 143 North Main. and we could win some partial funding there. And that may be just, demolition, remediation, and creation of green space. The Prospect Heights one, that requirement troubles me a little bit. It's just not enough time. We're not even, I don't have any concerns about our ability to find a developer for, there's going to be roughly 110, 120 dwelling units created when that's fully built out. But we're not going to do it by March because we won't even have a site plan by March. Right. I mean, we've actually signed that contract. Council approved that a couple of weeks ago, but we don't even have a plan to present to a developer. So honestly, that one felt like a little bit of a sucker punch, to be honest with you. So we need to have a serious conversation about, March 31st. I just don't think June 30th, I would likely be okay with that, but not March 31st.
These are 3-year grants. Like what?
6
years. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the part where, do they think we're incapable? Do they think we're incompetent? What do we need to show you? This is what we want. This is a neighborhood we want to create in our city. What level of assurance do we need to give you to show you that we're serious? Mr. Anthony?
Yeah, very quickly and pungently. This smells to me like, why don't you just shrink, depopulate the city of Barre? Why don't you? That will solve a lot of problems. Move away from the river, and instead of 9,000 people, why don't you become 7? And that, for me, is offensive.
Well, and now that we've all vented a little bit, in fairness, I wouldn't have wanted to be that team who had to. There were a lot of good projects that weren't funded, and that's the one thing about, competitive grants. I'm grateful to get them, and when I first heard about Prospect Heights prior to, hearing the condition, I was thrilled. But what I quickly default to is it's an honor for them to choose the city of Barre, and I have absolute faith in our team's ability to make ACCD and the administration proud. And that's our responsibility, because some folks didn't get anything, some good projects didn't get anything at all. And, we got $5.5 million for Prospect Heights, but we need something for the north end. That's going to be the big push.
It's like they don't take it seriously with North Barre. And I do like Councilwoman Guzman, when she said, even elevate it. I mean, for that matter, bring it up. Then make it into it's just like, you can't just leave it like it is. And it's like they're thinking, well, and I shouldn't say this, but, okay, we're going to give them money for these other things, and we'll sweep North Barre under the rug.
Well, yes, Councilor.
Sometimes there's reframing that can happen with these grants. And the Willie Street Bridge, if we talk not so much about it as being flood remediation, but rather being housing protection, would that be a way to reframe, or are they too smart for that?
It's possible. I would hate to jeopardize it with the same issue with the acquisitions, right? So if they then latch onto that to not fund it, these are questions. These are great. Got some great questions going around in my head after hearing the discussion, but that's possibly a way to try to see if it could be framed that way. But I wouldn't want to let that be a reason to not fund it on the back end as well.
It's kind of ironic, because way back when we first came up with Willie Street, I remember being here and saying, Willie Street, it's never flooded. And then you said, yeah, but our water treatment plant's there. And I did a complete 360 about how I feel about Willie Street. So I hear what you're saying. Turn it to a different, okay, yeah, we never had an issue, but our main water plant and, treatment plant's there. We need to protect it. So I guess I did a 360 after I realized that, protection.
I saw Thought Amy had her hand up. Okay,
I thought she did
guess-
too.
I guess not.
I was going to make the same point about Vermont. One way into the wastewater treatment plant, right? That's part of why you guys ranked it as one of the top projects, is because it's the only way into the wastewater treatment plant.
Now 0 for 2
Yeah.
on that one.
I mean, I think they were all good plans. Like I said, I was excited about more housing downtown, but, we all knew that $10 million was a big ask. So I think to spend a lot more time, if I had to say, well, what do I really want for Barre? I want the North End project. I would like to see somehow, even if it's partial funding and we have to do some flood mitigation on our own, I'd like to see I'd like to see the Willie Street Bridge incorporated into that project and perhaps push the total amount up a little bit. Or the state could present an alternative funding source. I'm not sure what the legislature is going to do in this legislative session with the flood resiliency grants.
Exactly.
So, Counselor?
I realize the timeline is really tight, so you're basically looking at just sort of reworking what we already have. Like, you're not going to come up with something new at
I
this
think
point,
the
because
only.
it's a short time.
Yeah, I think the only one that might be possible is 143 North Main, because now we will own it. We will have signed the purchase and sales by the time that this application is due. So there may be, I don't know if anything can come together quickly enough for that. I certainly think that, I think the idea would be to put most of our eggs in the North End Gateway project basket, and then maybe if there's something else ancillary, we can add there as well.
Well, I keep thinking about how we could, we've talked a lot about infill development and ADUs and things like that. And is there a way, which isn't a specific plan, but is there a way for us to get some money to help homeowners to, turn their basement into an apartment, or turn that space over the garage, or split their large house into a duplex? You know what I mean? Like, how could we finesse it to say, these are people that are already living here and maybe have space, and could we incentivize them to do that work?
I love those ideas. And the only challenge I'm seeing, having gone through this and then having had this follow-up with them, is the level of detail they're going to want and the level of commitment on the front end. They're going to want the property owners have made the commitment to know how many bedrooms they're going to get, and then make the commitments to the affordability component. So, Counselor, I don't want to come off as I'm.
No, that's why I'm asking.
That is,
because I'm
yeah,
just
that
trying to
is.
understand.
They would say, okay, give us a list of the homeowners who want
Yes.
to do it,
Yeah.
and show us that they have the funding.
And that they have a
and
contractor.
show us their plan,
Right.
and show us the quote.
Yeah.
They would not, if we said, well, here's what we want to do, we want to provide 40% grants. So if someone has a $100,000 project, that's going to create 2 dwelling units, we're going to give them 40,000, they wouldn't accept that. They need that level of detail.
They need the specificity,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, the specificity was in 355. I mean, it was there. I saw, I looked at the budget, and it's like, okay, this is sound, this is solid. They didn't have a commitment letter from a bank, but neither do most of the projects that were funded.
To give you an idea, they didn't like that in our buyouts for the North End, even though the buyouts generally were fine, they didn't like that the buyout applications didn't include the seeds for the grass to replant it.
In the budget?
Yes.
Oh, God.
So, just to give you an idea
Oh, my.
of the specificity. Wow. So, they said, overall, the applications were sound, the buyout component of the application was sound. We had the paperwork, we had the information, we had the options, we had the big items checked. They said, but you didn't have a budget, like, are you going to plant grass there? Yes, that wasn't in your budget. So that's how, just to give you a sense
Bring a
of the
wheelbarrow
detail.
down to Nelson's, and we will sort that out for you. A brief follow-up question on that, since you talked specifically to them about that grant. The concern I had raised earlier about the remaining pieces of that grant, the elevation and floodplain buyout pieces, being in the housing bucket, was that a concern that they had?
So we didn't want to get ahead of the council, of course, but we were pretty confident that people would be interested in moving forward. So we asked questions about and talked about when we resubmit this grant, and there was no hesitation on that. I think what saves it is the elevation piece, which has preservation of housing,
Yeah.
which counts towards the housing bucket. The buyouts by themselves, I think, wouldn't do it, but because the elevations are involved, that has preservation of 9 units. Plus, we would make an argument about preservation of larger swath of units with the buyout. So that lets us get our toe in the water on the housing bucket.
Any chance we can turn around some of the acquisitions with a small developer in time?
We could certainly talk to some. I don't know how much people would buy. It's also, it's not the easiest sell of a project because they would end up owning it. They're not huge parcels, and they're still in a floodplain, and so they're not. For example, as the mayor mentioned, I don't think anyone has doubts that we can sell these really highly desirable lots on Prospect Heights, which are elevated, and I don't think anyone's worried about that. But these might be a tougher sell. And so getting people to do it this early in I think we're confident we can get somebody to do it within the 6 years once we have a plot of land we can show them. I think at this point it might be perhaps too big of a leap for some people to sort of commit in writing to it.
And it's, it is interesting times. I don't know that you won't see a proposal from me saying, if we can't find a developer, why don't we do it ourselves? I mean, we're developing the lots, and generally we have expertise in the city. We have consultants that we've worked with. And if there are folks who are reluctant, I mean, the wonderful thing about municipalities and the reason why I don't do more at my age is I have a limited shelf life. And while it's sometimes difficult for me to accept that, I do. So when it really comes right down to, okay, do I want to buy this property? Do I want to develop this property? I've got to think about my shelf life and how many good years I have left. A municipality is in perpetuity. Right. That's the wonderful thing about it. And everyone in the city, so, everyone looks at property, not everyone, some people look at what developers do and they're fascinated by it. But the risk isn't acceptable to them. So they don't do it. And once you've done it for long enough, then you have enough financial strength to where the risk is acceptable. But I'm willing to bet you there are a lot of taxpayers in Barre City. If we went to them and said, well, how would you like to be part of this in terms of the city owns it? And if you live here, you're part of it too. And look, if we can't get a developer to do a project in Barre, then we'll do it ourselves. We'll get our own development team together. And that may very well,
Are you talking about Prospect Heights or are you talking about North End? Are you talking about Prospect Heights or are you talking about the North End?
Talking about either.
Okay.
Talking about either.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of times people say, all the developers make money. We do. Okay, if that's the case, why doesn't the city do it? And the city can make the money. So, so we're going to have to get a little creative. We're going to have to work a little harder in the next 2 months. But like I said, I'm going to make the phone calls that I feel have to be made, and I'm going to advocate for the city, and I encourage all of you to do the same. This is, it's game day. So, okay, anything else, council? If you come up with anything, just email Nicholas. Upcoming business, it's going to be CDBG, DR, and budget.
Yeah.
And that is about that. That is where our focus is. But like I said, if there's ever anything that the council would like to come up on the agenda, just email me. Yes, sir.
So the Parks and Rec Committee has finalized the micro grant application. And we'd like to bring that to council for approval.
Nice. Thank you. If there's nothing else, roundtable. Who wants to go? Councilor Deering, you good?
Yeah, I'll start. So speaking of the Parks and Rec Committee, we met last week, and we are going to have a sledding party, weather permitting, January 10th, tentatively 10 to 12. Still a couple of small things to work out, but that's the plan with that. Also, tomorrow evening, Barre City Middle School will be having a band playing. It's 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, all things from concert band to modern rock band. The chorus will also be playing, and you can come and watch me play tuba with the kiddos.
Where's the slide?
What time is it?
Elmwood Cemetery is the sledding party, and 6:30 is a concert tomorrow. We have also a couple other staff members that will be joining us as ringers, we'll call it. Haven't played in 25 years, so it's been interesting over the last week practicing, getting ready for that. We had rehearsals yesterday and today, and tomorrow is going to be a blast. So 6:30 at Barre City School tomorrow night.
All right, great.
Excellent. Councilor Hickox?
I'm going to pass.
Councilor Guston?
Pass.
Pass.
Councilor Spaulding?
Yeah, I have nothing.
You have nothing.
We only just met last week.
I know your family. You are blessed. You don't have nothing.
Oh, I mean, I have nothing to, yes, I
Add
pass.
this
There
evening.
you go.
Thank you. Councilor Ruthier?
Nothing really, just, I know we're all on the same team, but I do appreciate the feedback tonight for the North End. Thank you all.
Fantastic. So once again, I really appreciate the holiday party that we had over at Ladder One. It was just, like I said, it was just nice to be able to thank, because I think it's important to thank people. And it was nice to be able to just thank our staff people and thank their spouses, who I got to thank Nicholas's lovely wife, because, listen, I know I've been doing this for 2 decades, and you get the calls late at night, you get the calls during dinner, you all know that. And, but it's the job you sign up for, so you have to pick up the phone, no matter who is on the other end. You got to pick up the phone and you got to take that call. And so a lot of times it's your family, who misses out. So it was nice to be able to thank their spouses. And lastly, in case you didn't get the memo, Christmas is coming, so it'll be Christmas soon. I love the holiday. I love spending time with my family and friends. I love the way the world feels. Like maybe we all can get along. Maybe we can all, be a little bit better, like the TV shows. So really looking forward to that. And I am once again so grateful, because there are going to be a lot of people in Barre and in Central Vermont who are a little bit happier on Christmas Day. So I really appreciate everyone who gave, and for those who helped us raise money. It's a good feeling to give back. And with that, council, I do not believe we need an executive session. That would ruin Christmas. So a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Second.
And a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Oh.